My name is Jordan Ellis, and for the past 7 years, I've dedicated my life to fragrance. I'm not talking about generic perfumes off a department store shelf. I'm talking about real scent design, the kind that can shift a person's mood, unlock a memory, or ground someone in the present without them ever realizing what did it. I've been a senior perfumer at Rose and Resin, a small but fiercely respected fragrance house known for its innovation with natural essences. When our founder announced her retirement last year, she told me privately that I'd be her recommendation for head perfumer. That was before she handed over the reins to Mark, our new managing director, and before I boarded a plane to Tokyo for a 6-month intensive under one of the last scent masters in Japan. I came back home 2 weeks ago, jet-lagged, inspired, and carrying a notebook full of techniques that no one else in the company had ever even heard of. I walked into the lab thinking I'd be stepping into my new role. Instead, I found Skylar sitting at the head desk, the one that used to be Ingrid scrolling through her phone while Mark announced her promotion like it was a done deal. Skylar had been with Rose and Resin for all of 3 months. No formal training, no credentials, just a last name that matched Mark's family tree. I stood there, still wearing my travel coat, while people clapped out of politeness. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I understood what had just happened. They thought they'd sidelined me, but what they didn't realize was that the position they gave away wasn't just a title, it was a responsibility, and they had handed it to someone with no idea what she was about to unleash. The conference room smelled faintly of neroli and polished wood, but there was something sour beneath it. I stood by the back wall, still half unpacked from Tokyo, as Mark cleared his throat and tapped the edge of the table with his ring. Everyone fell silent. The tension was polite, but obvious. He didn't look at me when he spoke, just read from a printed statement that this was some kind of quarterly update. He thanked the team for their dedication, talked about innovation, then pivoted smoothly into announcing the company's new head perfumer, Skylar Jameson. A few heads turned toward me, a few more turned toward her. She was sitting near the front, legs crossed, holding a tiny designer notebook she hadn't written a word in. Her smile was glossy, practiced. When Mark said her name, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear like she'd just won a pageant, not been handed a legacy she hadn't earned. Mark said she'd shown incredible promise, that her approach to modern scent was bold, edgy, and exactly what the market needed, that her background in lifestyle branding was going to help reshape the company's future. I listened to every word like it was part of a pitch to investors, not a leadership decision in a craft built on chemistry and patience. No one mentioned that she was his niece. No one brought up that she'd only been with the company 3 months. No one said what we were all thinking, that I had spent 7 years building our signature line, that I had trained under the founder herself, and that I had just returned with proprietary methods no one else in the company had. The clapping was awkward. A few people smiled in my direction with that "sorry you got screwed" look. Skylar stood to say a few words, most of which were about how grateful she was and how excited she was to lead. When she finished, Mark added that I would be a great asset supporting her during the next product cycle. I think that was the moment I stopped hearing. My pulse had slowed. I stared at the table where Ingrid once sat. I remembered her notes, her belief in intuition, her warnings about people who cared more about control than creation. I glanced at Skylar. She was already talking to someone about office renovations. Mark finally turned to me, as if remembering I was still there. He asked if I had anything to say. I smiled. Not the kind that says thank you or congratulations. The kind that says you've made a mistake, but you won't see it until it's too late. I just said I looked forward to supporting the new direction. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the hallway. I just walked back to the lab, took off my coat, and wrote down one sentence in my notebook. This wasn't a promotion you gave away. It was a ticking time bomb. Tokyo was never just about technique. It was about unlearning everything I thought I knew about fragrance and starting from a place of stillness. Master Ayaka didn't teach from textbooks. She taught by walking through temple gardens at dawn, by asking me to sit silently with raw ingredients until I could feel their pulse. Her belief was simple but profound. A scent isn't just a smell, it's a message to the nervous system. When crafted with intention, it can ease anxiety, sharpen clarity, and even shift the course of a decision, not by overwhelming the senses, but by whispering to the part of the brain that memory calls home. We worked with ancient methods, techniques passed down quietly for centuries, balancing molecules in exact proportions to achieve harmony, not just in the air but inside the person inhaling it. Some blends were used to calm warriors before battle. Others helped grieving families find moments of peace in funeral rituals. Ayaka often reminded me that fragrance is a kind of alchemy, not to manipulate, but to restore. She would say, "The best scent doesn't scream. It listens first, then speaks in a way only the heart understands." Those 6 months reshaped me. I stopped seeing perfume as a product. I started seeing it as a bridge between science and soul, memory and mood, pain and relief. What I brought back from Tokyo wasn't just skill, it was reverence. And I knew that if used carelessly, that kind of knowledge could do more harm than good. It started with a bottle left uncapped on her bench. I noticed the top notes didn't lift the way they should. Instead of opening with brightness, the scent hit heavy and flat, like someone pressing down on a piano's lower keys while trying to play a lullaby. I stayed late that night, long after the others had gone home. I opened her formulation notebook, expecting to see minor rookie mistakes. What I found was worse. She had doubled concentrations on compounds that required precision, ignored stabilizers, and layered opposing molecules without a single test strip logged. One particular blend caught my eye. It was her showpiece scent. The one Mark kept calling revolutionary. She'd named it Impact, a name that turned out to be more accurate than she knew. On paper, it looked aggressive but harmless. In the real world, especially in a warm, crowded setting, it had the potential to overstimulate the amygdala and trigger sensory fatigue or even mild panic. She had no idea what she was working with. I could tell from the ratios that she was chasing strength over subtlety, force over finesse. This wasn't a fragrance. It was a warning siren dressed in a designer bottle. I closed the book and sat with the weight of what I knew. If she launched this scent at the upcoming exhibition, it wouldn't just ruin her reputation. It could damage the company Ingrid built and everything I had quietly protected. That night, I didn't sleep. I started planning, not how to stop her, how to let the truth reveal itself with perfect, undeniable clarity. 2 days before the exhibition, Skylar spilled half of her signature blend across the lab floor. The bottle slipped from her hand as she turned too quickly, the golden liquid spreading like a slow disaster over polished concrete. She froze, looked at me, and said she didn't know how she was going to remake it in time. Mark was out courting press coverage. The other perfumers had been sidelined weeks ago. I was the only one with full access to the lab and the raw ingredients. She didn't ask if I would help. She just assumed I would, like it was my job to fix her mess, the way assistants patch up broken egos. I told her I'd do it, calmly, reassuringly. I even told her I had memorized her formula, which was technically true. What I didn't mention was that I'd also memorized the way it broke down under stress, heat, and moisture. I offered to work through the night so she could get some rest. She thanked me without making eye contact. Once the lab was empty, I pulled out her notes and read through them one last time. Her version of Impact wasn't just unbalanced. It was dangerous in the way a loud sound can be beautiful until it's played on loop in a tight room. I didn't tamper. I didn't sabotage. I adjusted. I lowered the intensity of one compound and rebalanced 2 others to fall just within the threshold of acceptability. In the lab, with filtered air and steady temperatures, it would hold. But in a room filled with people, warm bodies, and shifting humidity, the scent would begin to fracture. Not immediately, slowly, like something unraveling from the inside out. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt precise. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about creating a moment she couldn't escape with charm or name-dropping. She needed to learn what happens when you bypass craft for shortcuts. Before I left, I wrote a detailed handling guide and tucked it into the box of finished samples. I knew she wouldn't read it, but I wanted the record there, proof that someone had cared enough to do it right. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and walked out with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer needed to be seen to be heard. The exhibition hall buzzed with elegance and nerves. Our booth sat near the entrance, polished to perfection, with Skylar's signature scent, Impact, displayed in glass towers and ready to be diffused. She stood front and center, smiling for photos, spraying samples like confetti, while Mark hovered nearby, already planning the press release. At first, everything went according to plan. A few buyers lingered, complimented the boldness of the scent, and scribbled notes. But then, the shift came. It was subtle, like a draft slipping through a closed window. People began stepping back, rubbing their temples, loosening ties. A woman from a luxury boutique looked around, confused, and said the air felt tight. Skylar brushed it off, said it was part of the complexity. Mark looked concerned but kept smiling. Minutes passed, and the booth grew quieter. One buyer excused himself mid-conversation. A journalist left without taking a sample. Then someone whispered that another vendor complained about the scent bleeding into their space. Mark snapped, told Skylar to increase the diffuser output. I watched from behind the table, silent, steady, prepared. When the air thickened and the first real symptoms set in short breaths, shifting glances, people moving away, I opened the drawer beneath our display and retrieved the vial I had prepared 2 nights before. It was a stabilizer I'd developed, using principles from Tokyo. Not a mask, not a cover. A true neutralizing agent meant to bind with unstable compounds and reset the environment. I walked over to the central diffuser and quietly poured the amber liquid into the base. Within minutes, the energy shifted. The scent softened. Tension drained from the room, like water from a punctured hose. People stopped leaving. One woman circled back, said something smelled clearer now. Another leaned in, inhaled, and called it grounding. Skylar stared at me, pale, speechless. Mark looked like he was calculating how to spin this in real time. I didn't gloat. I didn't say I told you so. I simply handed him a copy of the formulation notes and pointed to the section he never bothered to read. That's when the director of the exhibition arrived, flanked by board members from the Fragrance Association. He asked what had happened. Mark opened his mouth to answer, but I stepped forward. I explained the science. I explained the correction. And I watched as the entire room recalibrated. Not just the air, but the respect that had quietly shifted from Skylar to me. The emergency board meeting was scheduled less than 12 hours after the exhibition ended. I arrived early, calm but ready, carrying a binder filled with everything they would need. Technical breakdowns of Skylar's formula, stability reports, my certification from Tokyo, and personal correspondence with Ingrid, confirming her intention to pass me the role. The boardroom was full. Senior executives, outside consultants, even shareholders who hadn't shown their faces in years. Mark sat near the head of the table, stiff and flushed. Skylar wasn't there. Whether by choice or instruction, she had quietly disappeared. The chairman opened with a recap of the exhibition incident. He spoke in neutral tones, but his eyes moved sharply as he named the complaints, the press attention, and the potential financial damage. Then he asked if anyone could speak to the technical cause of the failure. I stood and began. I explained the way scent molecules behave under environmental stress, how certain compounds need stabilizers, especially in open-air diffusion. I outlined the gaps in the formulation, the oversight in quality control, and the risks ignored. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I showed them the chemistry and let the truth speak in the language of precision. When I finished, the room was still. Then the chairman asked about the recovery. I described the stabilizer I'd created. It was developed from techniques I learned during my training in Tokyo. I showed documentation of the molecular structure and how it had neutralized the problem without masking the original notes. He turned to Mark, asked whether he had reviewed my training materials before appointing Skylar. Mark deflected, saying the company needed someone immediately. The chairman nodded slowly, then pulled a letter from his folder. It was a handwritten note from Ingrid, dated the week she retired, stating clearly that my Tokyo trip was the final preparation for me to assume the head perfumer role. That changed the tone entirely. The Nordica buyers had followed up with a letter of interest, only if I remained in charge of scent development. The exhibition director submitted a glowing report, and members of the press had already begun calling me the quiet force behind the restoration of the brand. The board took a private vote. It didn't take long. When they returned, the chairman stood. He announced that, effective immediately, I would be promoted to head perfumer and placed in charge of all creative development. Mark would be reassigned to regional sales, with a focus on secondary markets. Schuyler's name wasn't mentioned again. As the meeting adjourned, several board members approached me, offering congratulations, sharing quiet regrets. I accepted them without bitterness. I hadn't needed revenge. I had needed recognition. And now, I had it in full, undeniable form. When I left the room, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. The weight of years, carrying quiet expertise, had finally settled into its rightful place. Justice didn't roar. It resonated, clean and steady, like the final note of a well-built chord. In the months that followed, the company began to shift, quietly at first, like a door closing softly behind you while another opens in a different room. Mark packed up his office and moved into a smaller one on the far end of the building, closer to logistics than creation. We rarely spoke, but when we did, it was polite, measured, and laced with everything that didn't need to be said. Schuyler withdrew completely. Word came through HR that she had enrolled in a long-term perfumery program in Grasse. It was a good choice. There was talent in her, somewhere under the ego and rush. But she had skipped steps that mattered. Now, maybe she would learn what it meant to earn something, rather than inherit it. I focused on the work, on rebuilding the team, restoring protocols, and writing a new vision rooted in everything Ingrid once believed. We launched a new collection 3 months later, called Clarity. Every scent in the line was designed to evoke emotional restoration, calm, focus, lightness. They didn't overwhelm, they invited. Clarity debuted at the International Wellness Summit and received praise not for being loud but for being needed. Critics called it a return to thoughtful fragrance. Clients wrote in, saying it helped them sleep, helped them grieve, and helped them come back to themselves. For the first time, I wasn't just proud of what we made. I was proud of how we got there. Looking back, I never wanted to destroy anyone. I didn't set out to humiliate Mark or punish Schuyler. What I wanted was balance. What I needed was truth to be seen without shouting it. And I learned something in the process, something Ayaka tried to teach me in Tokyo. The most satisfying revenge isn't destruction, it's restoration. It's when you take what was broken, what was stolen, what was dismissed, and you build something better from it. It's when the very thing they tried to bury becomes the foundation of something lasting. I never burned bridges. I rebuilt them, stronger. I didn't cut people down. I grew past them. I didn't crush my opposition. I let the silence of their failure speak louder than anything I could say. So, no, this was never about revenge. This was about returning things to their rightful place. About reminding everyone, including myself, that what's earned with patience, mastery, and heart will always outlast what's taken by shortcut. And that, to me, is legacy. In the months that followed, the company began to shift. Quietly at first, like a door closing softly behind you, while another opens in a different room. Mark packed up his office and moved into a smaller one on the far end of the building, closer to logistics than creation. We rarely spoke, but when we did, it was polite, measured, and laced with everything that didn't need to be said. Schuyler withdrew completely. Word came through HR that she had enrolled in a long-term perfumery program in Grasse. It was a good choice. There was talent in her, somewhere under the ego and rush, but she had skipped steps that mattered. Now, Maybe she would learn what it meant to earn something rather than inherit it. I focused on the work, on rebuilding the team, restoring protocols, and writing a new vision rooted in everything Ingrid once believed. We launched a new collection 3 months later, called Clarity. Every scent in the line was designed to evoke emotional restoration. Calm, focus, lightness. They didn't overwhelm, they invited. Clarity debuted at the International Wellness Summit and received praise not for being loud but for being needed. Critics called it a return to thoughtful fragrance. Clients wrote in saying it helped them sleep, helped them grieve, and helped them come back to themselves. For the first time, I wasn't just proud of what we made. I was proud of how we got there. Looking back, I never wanted to destroy anyone. I didn't set out to humiliate Mark or punish Skylar. What I wanted was balance. What I needed was truth to be seen without shouting it. And I learned something in the process, something Ayaka tried to teach me in Tokyo. The most satisfying revenge isn't destruction. It's restoration. It's when you take what was broken, what was stolen, what was dismissed, and you build something better from it. It's when the very thing they tried to bury becomes the foundation of something lasting. I never burned bridges. I rebuilt them, stronger. I didn't cut people down. I grew past them. I didn't crush my opposition. I let the silence of their failure speak louder than anything I could say. So, no. This was never about revenge. This was about returning things to their rightful place. About reminding everyone, including myself, that what's earned with patience, mastery, and heart will always outlast what's taken by shortcut. And that, to me, is legacy.